The great council chamber stretched out like a vast metal cave, its walls reaching up into darkness. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows, their various forms creating strange shadows under the cold blue lights. Some had scales that glittered. Like jewels, others had skin that seemed to shift colors with their moods. A few floated in special tanks filled with glowing liquid, while others needed machines to help them breathe the chamber's air. Admiral Jake Morrison stood alone in the center of it all. His simple blue uniform looked plain next to the fancy robes and decorated armor of the alien council members. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, the kind of person who had seen too much of the galaxy's problems. His hands stayed calm at his sides even though he knew what was coming. Dr. Lisa Carter sat in the viewing area above the main floor. She was younger than Jake, with brown hair pulled back in a simple style. Her job was to speak for Earth scientists. But today she could only watch. The alien leaders had made it clear that humans would not be allowed to defend themselves. They would only be allowed to listen. The Zephyrian ambassador rose from his seat. His people looked like giant birds with 4 arms and golden feathers that caught the light. When he spoke, his voice came out as a series of clicks and whistles that the chamber's computers turned into words. Everyone could understand. The Galactic Council has reached a decision about the human species, he announced. His tone was the same one someone might use to discuss the weather. After careful study of their actions over the past 50 years, we have found them to be a danger to galactic peace. Jake kept his face empty of expression. He had expected this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. Around the chamber, other alien representatives nodded their agreement. Some looked pleased, others seemed bored as if they were discussing something as simple as trade routes. Humans expand too quickly, continued a delegate from the Karathi Union. The Karathi looked like walking trees with thick bark for skin and leaves that rustled when they moved. They build colonies on worlds that should be left empty. They take resources that belong to everyone. Their technology advances without wisdom, added a representative from the Eternal Dominion. The Eternals were proud of being the oldest race in the galaxy. They lived for thousands of years and looked down on species that live for less than a century. They create weapons before they understand peace. They explore space before they understand themselves. Jake wanted to speak up, to remind them of all the good things humans had done. He thought about the medical stations his people had built, the trade routes they had opened, the times human ships had rushed to help when alien worlds faced disasters. But the rules were clear. Humans could only listen today. Dr. gripped the rail in front of her seat. She had worked with many of these aliens before. She had shared research with them, helped solve problems on their worlds, considered some of them friends. Now they spoke about her entire species as if humans were nothing more than a mistake that needed to be fixed. The human military is too strong, declared a member of the Valdris Empire. The Valdris were a warrior race that looked like giant insects with metal armor grafted onto their bodies. It was strange to hear them complain about someone else being too warlike. They build ships that can destroy planets. They train soldiers who know only how to fight. Their explorers go too. Places they should not go, said another voice. This came from the Nixarian Confederacy representative, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of pure energy. They ask questions that should not be asked. They disturb things that should be left alone. Jake almost smiled at that. 1. Humans did ask a lot of questions. They did like to explore places others feared to visit. But wasn't that how progress was made? Wasn't that how problems got solved? Apparently. The council thought differently. Ambassador Kate Phillips sat in the human delegation area near the front of the chamber. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being tough in negotiations. She had spent the last 10 years working with these aliens, learning their customs, building relationships that she hoped would keep peace between the species. Now she watched those relationships crumble in front of her. The decision is final, announced the Zephyrian ambassador. Humanity will lose all voting rights in this council. All human exploration permits are canceled. All human colonies outside. The Sol system will be redistributed to species that can manage them responsibly. The chamber filled with a low hum of approval from the alien delegates. Some of them were clearly happy about this decision. Others just seemed relieved that the issue was finally settled. A few looked uncomfortable, but they stayed silent. Human ships will return to Earth immediately, the ambassador continued. All human involvement in galactic affairs will cease. The human species will be confined to their home system until they can prove they have learned to be civilized. Jake felt his heart sink. Everything humans had worked for over the past 50 years was being taken away. All the colonies where families had built new lives. All the research stations where scientists had made amazing discoveries. All the trade agreements that had helped Earth prosper, gone in a single afternoon. Captain Ron Blake was not in the chamber, but Jake knew he was listening. Ron commanded the New Horizon, one of humanity's most advanced exploration ships. At this very moment, he was probably discovering some new star system or helping solve a crisis on a distant world. Soon, he would receive the message telling him to come home and never leave again. The human representatives may leave, said the Zephyrian ambassador. This council has other business to attend to. That was it. No chance to appeal, no opportunity to negotiate, no time to explain how wrong they were. The most powerful beings in the galaxy had decided that humans were a problem, and problems needed to be eliminated. Ambassador Phillips stood up slowly. She gathered her papers and put them in her briefcase with careful, measured movements. Every eye in the chamber was on her, waiting to see how she would react. Some of the aliens probably expected her to argue, to threaten, to make a scene that would prove their point about human aggression. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone. She looked around the chamber one last time, her expression calm and neutral. Then she nodded once as if she was simply acknowledging a business decision, and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. No one spoke as she moved up the long ramp toward the doors. Even the aliens seemed caught off guard by her reaction. They had prepared for anger, for defiance, for desperate pleas. They had not prepared for quiet acceptance. Dr. Carter followed her out, along with the other human delegates. None of them said a word. They walked past the alien representatives like people leaving a boring meeting, their faces showing nothing of what they felt inside. Jake was the last to leave. He took one final look at the chamber where humanity's fate had been decided. Then he turned and walked away, his back straight and his head held high. The heavy doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The aliens were left alone in their chamber, already turning their attention to other matters. They had solved the human problem quickly and efficiently. Now they could get back to the important work of running the galaxy. None of them noticed the small smile that had crossed Kate Phillips' face as she walked out the door. None of them understood that silence could be more dangerous than the loudest shout. They had gotten exactly what they asked for, a galaxy without human interference. They would soon learn to regret that wish. The message reached Captain Ron Blake while he was standing on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching his crew repair a damaged alien cargo ship. The ship belonged to a family of traders from the Vega system who had been attacked by pirates. Ron's people had been working for 6 hours to fix their engines, asking nothing in return except a safe journey home. Ron read the message twice, his face growing darker with each word. The Galactic Council had spoken. All human vessels were to return to Earth immediately. All exploration missions were canceled. All aid operations were to stop. "Sir?" asked Lieutenant Mary Johnson, his second in command. She was a young woman with short red hair and the kind of steady nerves that made her perfect for deep space work. "What are our orders?" Ron looked out at the alien ship they were helping. The family inside had 3 small children who would die if their life support failed. His crew was almost done with the repairs. Another hour and the aliens would be safe. "Finish the repairs," he said quietly. "Then we go home." Mary nodded. She could tell from his voice that something bad had happened, but she trusted him to tell her when the time was right. That was how things worked on human ships. People did their jobs and trusted their officers to make the right choices, 3 star systems away. Commander Steve Rogers was dealing with a different kind of problem. He stood in the main plaza of Kepler Prime, humanity's largest farming colony. Around him, Thousands of human settlers were packing their belongings and loading them onto transport ships. The local aliens who lived nearby had come to watch. They looked confused and worried. For 20 years, they had bought food from the human farmers. The humans grew crops that other species could not manage, using techniques that turned dead soil into rich farmland. Without human food, many of the alien settlements would starve. "You cannot leave," said Counselor Vex-2, the leader of the nearest alien city. He was a Korathi, one of the tree-like beings who had voted to kick humans out of the galaxy. "Our people depend on your crops. What will we eat?" Steve looked at the alien without anger or hatred. His face was calm, almost friendly. "The Galactic Council has decided that humans should not be involved in galactic affairs. We are simply following their wishes." "But the food contracts," Vex-2 stammered. "We have agreements, legal documents. You cannot just break them." Steve pulled out a small device and showed it to the alien. On the screen were the official council documents, stamped with the seals of dozens of alien governments. According to this, all human contracts are void. All human colonies are to be redistributed. "We are just making it easier for you." The alien's leaves rustled in distress. "But we do not know how to farm like you do. We do not have the machines. Or the knowledge. It will take years to learn." "I am sorry," Steve said, and he truly meant it. "But this is what the council wanted." He turned and walked toward the transport ships, leaving the aliens standing alone in the plaza. Around them, the evacuation continued with mechanical efficiency. Every human on the planet would be gone within a week. On the industrial world of Titan Beta, engineer Amy Thompson was working 18-hour days to shut down the massive factories that had supplied energy to half the sector. The fusion reactors hummed as they powered down for the last time. The assembly lines that had built everything from Starship engines to medical equipment ground to a halt. Amy was a small woman with dirty, blonde hair and hands that were always stained with grease. She had spent 10 years building these factories, designing systems that could run for decades without major repairs. Now she was taking them apart piece by piece. "Please reconsider," begged Director Zelkoth of the Altarian Trade Federation. The Altarian looked like a giant squid with too many eyes, all of them focused on Amy with desperate intensity. "These factories provide jobs for millions of our people. Without them, our economy will collapse." Amy did not look up from her work. She was carefully removing a control module from one of the reactors, making sure not to damage it. "The Council said humans should not be involved in galactic affairs. These factories are human-built and human-operated. Therefore, they should not exist." "But we can pay you," Zelkoth pleaded. "We can give you better contracts, more money. Whatever you want, just do not shut everything down." "Money is not the issue," Amy replied. She finished removing the module and placed it carefully in a shipping container. "The Council has made their decision. We are just following orders." The Altarian's tentacles twisted in frustration. "But what about maintenance? What about repairs? These machines are too complex for our people to understand." Amy finally looked up at him. Her expression was not cruel, but it was not kind either. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before you voted to remove us from the galaxy." The medical research station in the Vega system was shutting down too. Dr. Pete Johnson moved through the laboratories like a ghost, packing up equipment that had saved millions of lives. The healing devices his team had developed could cure diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. The surgical robots could perform operations that no organic being could manage. Dr. Johnson was an older man with gray hair and gentle eyes. He had spent his career helping others, working with alien scientists to solve medical problems that seemed impossible. Now he was destroying decades of collaborative research. "You cannot do this," said Dr. Yolnara, his research partner for the past 15 years. She was a Nexarian, one of the energy beings who floated in special containment suits. "The data we have collected could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy." Pete continued packing, his movements careful and precise. "The Council said humans are too dangerous to be involved in galactic affairs. I assume that includes medical research." "But people will die," Yonara protested. Without these treatments, entire species will suffer from diseases we could easily cure. Pete paused in his work. For a moment, his calm mask slipped, and Yilnara could see the pain in his eyes. I know, he said quietly. But this is what the council wanted. They said humans should not interfere in galactic matters. Apparently that includes saving lives. He resumed packing, his hands steady despite the emotion in his voice. The council was very clear. They want us gone, so we are going. Back on Earth, the reports were coming in from every corner of the galaxy. Human colonies were evacuating with impressive speed. Human businesses were closing their doors. Human research stations were going dark. The exodus was happening faster than anyone had expected. Senator Lucy Davis sat in her office in Geneva, reading message after message from alien governments. They were starting to realize what they had done. The requests for meetings were piling up. The desperate pleas for humans to reconsider were becoming more frequent. Lucy was a sharp woman with silver hair and the kind of political instincts that had made her one of Earth's most effective diplomats. She had spent 20 years building relationships with alien governments, negotiating treaties that had kept the peace and helped both sides prosper. Now, she was systematically destroying all of that work. Ma'am, said her assistant, a young man named Paul. The Karathi ambassador is here. He says it is urgent. Lucy looked up from her desk. Tell him I am busy. Tell him I will be busy for the foreseeable future. Paul shifted uncomfortably. He says their people are already starting to go hungry. The food shipments from Kepler Prime have stopped. That is not our problem anymore, Lucy replied. The council made it clear that humans should not be involved in galactic affairs. Food distribution is a galactic affair? But ma'am, Paul said. People are going to starve. Lucy's expression did not change. Then perhaps the council should have thought about that before they kicked us out of the galaxy. She turned back to her work, ignoring the increasingly desperate messages that filled her computer screen. The aliens were starting to panic, but it was too late. The humans were going home, and they were taking everything with them. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to live without human help. The lesson would be harder than anyone imagined. 6 months had passed since the humans began their exodus from the galaxy. The silence was growing louder every day. Trade Captain Vexlow of the Korathi Union stared at his empty cargo hold and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. His ship sat in the orbital docks above Kepler Prime, the same planet where humans had grown food for dozens of worlds. Now the planet was empty except for a few alien settlements that were already running out of supplies. Any word from the transport companies? Asked his first mate, another Korathi whose bark-like skin was showing stress patterns of worry. Vexlow shook his head. No one will take the job. The shipping routes are too dangerous without human patrol ships. 3 freighters were attacked by pirates last week in the Outer Rim. Word is spreading fast. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the shipping business. For 50 years, human companies had quietly taken over most of the galaxy's cargo. Transport. They had the fastest ships, the most reliable schedules, and the best security. Other species had been happy to let them handle the difficult and dangerous work. Now those ships were gone, and no one else knew how to do the job. On the other side of the galaxy, Administrator Kolneth of the Nexarian Confederacy was facing an even bigger crisis. The terraforming equipment on New Centauri had started failing, and without it, the atmosphere on the colony world would become poisonous within months. Have you found the technical manuals? He asked his chief engineer, a floating energy being whose light was flickering with stress. The humans took everything, the engineer replied. All the repair guides, all the maintenance schedules, all the replacement part specifications. We have the machines, but we do not know how they work. Kolneth felt his energy form dim with despair. What about the human technicians who used to work here? Can we contact them? They are all gone. Every single human in the sector returned to Earth, and Earth is not answering our calls. 3 million Nexarians lived on New Centauri. If the terraforming equipment failed completely, they would all have to be evacuated. But the human shipping companies that could have moved that many people no longer existed. Senator Lucy Davis had been watching the desperate messages pile up on her desk for weeks. She was no longer the human representative to the Galactic Trade Commission because there was no human representative anymore. Officially, her job had ended when the Council kicked humanity out of galactic affairs, but the aliens kept calling. Anyway, the Valdris Empire is offering triple pay for any human shipping company willing to transport medical supplies, reported her assistant Paul. Their colony ships are stuck in the Andromeda sector with failing life support. Lucy did not look up from her paperwork. Are there any human shipping companies in the Andromeda sector? No, ma'am. They all came home like everyone else. Then I suppose the Valdris have a problem, Paul hesitated. Ma'am, there are civilians. On those ships, families with children? Lucy finally looked up, her expression cold. Did the Valdris think about those families when they voted to remove humans from the galaxy? Did they consider civilian lives when they supported the Council's decision? Paul had no answer for that. The Valdris had been one of the most vocal supporters of the human removal. Their ambassador had called humans a military threat that needed to be contained. Now their own people were dying because human help was no longer available. The crisis was spreading faster than anyone had expected. The hegemony's military was discovering that their weapons did not work without human-manufactured ammunition. The special alloys and explosive compounds had always been made in human factories. But no one had paid attention to that detail. General Thekmore of the hegemony. Defense Force stood in his command center, looking at reports from across his territory. Half his battle fleet was grounded because they could not get the parts they needed. The other half was running low on fuel because the refineries that processed Starship fuel had all been human-operated. Sir, said one of his officers, we are receiving distress calls from the mining colonies in Sector 7. Pirate attacks are increasing, and we cannot send help. Thekmore's forearms tensed with frustration. What about the local defense forces? They are using human-made weapons, sir. Without replacement parts and ammunition, they are almost useless. The general had been proud when the Council voted to remove humans from the galaxy. He had seen them as competitors, a young species that had grown too powerful too quickly. Now he was learning that they had not been competitors at all. They had been the foundation that everything else was built on. Dr. Yulnara floated in her containment suit, staring at the medical equipment that was slowly shutting down. Without human technicians to maintain the machines, the advanced medical station in the Vega system was becoming useless. The healing devices that had saved so many lives were failing one by one. Can we contact the human doctors? She asked her assistant. Perhaps they would help us remotely. We have tried, the assistant replied. Earth's communication networks are not accepting calls from outside the Sol system. They have completely cut themselves off. Yulnara's energy form flickered with sadness. Dr. Johnson and his team spent 15 years building this place. They saved millions of lives. Now it is all falling apart. The assistant was quiet for a moment. Perhaps that was the point, ma'am. Perhaps they knew this would happen. The thought was disturbing. Had the humans planned this? Had they known that their removal would cause so much chaos? Or were they simply following the Council's orders so completely that they had not considered the consequences? Captain Dan Miller commanded the last human security patrol in the Outer Rim. His ship, the Defender, was scheduled to return to Earth in 3 days. After that, there would be no human presence in the most dangerous part of the galaxy. Sir, said his communications officer, we are receiving a priority message from the Rim Defense Coalition. They are begging us to stay. Dan looked at the message on his screen. The coalition was a group of small alien governments that had banded together to fight piracy and smuggling. For 20 years, human patrol ships had helped them keep the peace. Now they were facing that fight alone. What is our response, sir? Asked the officer. Don deleted the message without reading it completely. Our response is the same as always. We are following the Council's orders. Humans are no longer involved in galactic affairs. The officer looked uncomfortable. But sir, without our patrols, the pirates will take over the entire sector. Hundreds of worlds could fall under their control. Then perhaps the Council should have thought about that before they decided we were too dangerous to be trusted. Don turned back to his command console. In 3 days, the Defender would be gone. The orbital platforms that had protected merchant ships from pirates would go dark. The communication networks that had allowed quick response to emergencies would shut down. The careful balance of power that had kept the peace in the Outer Rim would collapse. But that was no longer humanity's problem. Back on Earth. Director Sam Wright worked around the clock coordinating the greatest technological recall in galactic history. Every piece of human technology that had been sold, leased, or shared with alien species carried hidden shutdown codes. Sam had the power to deactivate them all with a few keystrokes. The Eternal Dominion is offering us a permanent seat on the ruling council if we reactivate their defense systems, reported one of his staff members. Sam did not even look up from his work. The Eternal Dominion voted to remove us from the galaxy. They called us dangerous children who needed to be taught. Their place, I think they can learn to live without our dangerous children's toys. What about the medical equipment? People are dying without the healing devices. Sam finally paused in his typing. People have been dying for millions of years without human medical technology. They will adapt. The shutdown codes were already being transmitted. Across the galaxy, human-built machines were receiving the signals and powering down. Defense systems went offline. Medical devices stopped working. Communication networks fell silent. Industrial equipment ground to a halt. The galaxy was learning what it meant to live without human technology. The lesson was harder than anyone had imagined. In the Great Council Chamber where it all began, the alien representatives were starting to realize the scale of their mistake. The reports coming in from every corner of the galaxy painted a picture of growing chaos. Worlds were going dark. Civilizations were collapsing. The careful order that had maintained galactic peace for generations was falling apart. And through it all, the humans remained silent. They had walked away quietly, just as they had promised. They had removed themselves from galactic affairs completely. Just as the Council had demanded, the Council was getting exactly what they had asked for. They were just discovering that what they had asked for was the end of everything they had built. 1 year had passed since the humans left the galaxy. The Great Council Chamber was full again, but this time the mood was very different. Instead of the confident voices that had voted to remove humanity, there were desperate whispers and panicked discussions. Council Speaker Zaratala looked around the chamber with growing dread. Her people, the Zephyrians, had been among the loudest supporters of the human removal. Now her homeworld was facing complete economic collapse. The golden feathers that had once made her species proud were now dull with stress and poor nutrition. The situation reports, she announced, her voice barely steady. Please present them in order of severity. The first speaker was Administrator Kolneth from the Nixarian Confederacy. His energy form was so dim that he could barely be seen inside his containment suit. New Centauri is lost, he said simply. The terraforming equipment failed completely. 3 months ago. We managed to evacuate only half the population before the atmosphere became poisonous. A shocked silence filled the chamber. New Centauri had been one of the most successful colony worlds in the galaxy, home to over 3 million beings. Now it was a dead rock floating in space. Where are the survivors? Asked someone from the back of the chamber. Scattered across dozens of refugee camps, Kolneth replied. Most are dying slowly from exposure to atmospheres they cannot breathe. We do not have the technology to build proper life support systems for so many people. General Thekmore of the Hegemony spoke next. His forearms hung limply at his sides, and his usual military bearing had been replaced by something that looked like defeat. The Outer Rim has fallen to pirates completely. Without human patrol ships, they took over everything within 6 months. 12 worlds are now under pirate control, and the number is growing every week. What about your own forces? Asked Zaratala. Useless, Thekmore admitted. 60% of our weapons do not work without human-made ammunition. The ships that still function cannot travel far because the fuel refineries were all human-operated. We are essentially defenseless. The reports continued, each one worse than the last. The Karathi Union was facing mass starvation because their food distribution networks had collapsed. The Valdris Empire had lost 3 entire colony fleets when their life support systems failed in deep space. The Altarian Trade Federation was Bankrupt because their factories could not operate without human-built power systems. How many dead? Asked Zaratala, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Conservative estimates put the number at 50 million, replied the Chamber's information officer. That includes deaths from starvation, equipment failures, pirate attacks, and medical emergencies. The actual number is probably much higher. 50 million dead. The number was so large that it was hard to understand. Entire species were on the edge of extinction, and it had only been 1 year. What about contacting Earth? Suggested Counselor Vextu of the Korathi. Perhaps we can negotiate some kind of agreement. We have tried, said the information officer. Earth's communication networks automatically reject all incoming calls from outside the Sol system. We have sent ships to the edge of their space, but they are turned away by automated defense systems. Surely they will listen to reason, Vextu insisted. They cannot want to see the entire galaxy collapse. Zaratala looked at him with something close to pity. Can they not? We told them they were too dangerous to be trusted. We removed them from all galactic affairs. We treated them like criminals. Why should they care what happens to us now? The truth was starting to sink in. The humans had not left because they were angry or hurt. They had left because they had been ordered to leave. They had followed the Council's wishes perfectly, completely, and without question. The disaster that followed was not revenge. It was simply the natural consequence of removing the people who had been holding everything. Together, Dr. Yulnara appeared on the Chamber's main screen, transmitting from what was left of the medical research station in the Vega system. Her energy form was so weak that she could barely maintain coherence inside her containment suit. The medical crisis is getting worse, she reported. Without human-made healing devices, we are seeing the return of diseases that were eliminated decades ago. The plague of sorrow is spreading through the Centauri sector. The wasting death has appeared on 17 worlds. We estimate that medical-related deaths will reach 100 million within the next 6 months. What about the research data? Asked someone. Surely we can rebuild the healing devices using human designs. The humans deleted everything before they left, Yulnara replied. All the research files, all the technical specifications, all the manufacturing instructions. They took it all with them. But you worked with Dr. Johnson for 15 years, protested the questioner. You must remember something. Yulnara's form flickered with what might have been sad laughter. I remember that he was always very careful about security. He said that advanced medical technology should not fall into the wrong hands. I thought he was talking about pirates or criminals. Now I realize he was talking about us. The chamber fell silent again. The implications were starting to become clear. The humans had not just left. They had prepared for this moment. They had built hidden shutdown codes into their technology. They had kept their most important knowledge secret. They had created a situation where their removal would cause maximum damage to the galaxy. Did they plan this? Asked Zaratala. Did they know we would vote to remove them? I do not think they planned it, replied Administrator Kolneth. I think they prepared for it. There is a difference. What do you mean? I mean they knew that other species feared their rapid growth. They knew that someday someone would try to stop them. So they made sure that stopping them would be more painful than accepting them. The idea was terrifying. It suggested that humans were not just advanced, they were strategic. They had thought several steps ahead, anticipating problems and preparing solutions. While other species had been focused on their own immediate concerns, humans had been thinking about the long-term consequences of galactic politics. Captain Vexlo of the Korathi Union had managed to get a message through to the chamber from the ruins of the shipping industry. His cargo ship was stranded in the Outer Rim, damaged by pirates and unable to get repairs. The transportation networks are completely broken, he reported. Without human shipping companies, there is no way to move goods between systems. Worlds that used to receive supplies every week have not seen a cargo ship in months. People are starving while food sits rotting in warehouses on other planets. What about using our own ships? Asked Zaratala. Most of our ships were designed For short-range travel between nearby systems, Vexlo explained. The humans specialized in long-distance cargo transport. They had the navigation systems, the fuel efficiency, the cargo capacity. We never bothered to develop those technologies ourselves because we could just hire human companies to do the work. It was the same story everywhere. Species had become dependent on human expertise without realizing it. They had let humans handle the difficult jobs, the dangerous missions, the complex technologies. Now those humans were gone and no one else knew how to do the work. Ambassador Kate Phillips finally broke her silence. She appeared on the chamber's communication screen, transmitting from a small diplomatic station on the edge of the Sol system. She looked exactly the same as she had a year ago, calm, professional, and completely unmoved by the chaos around her. The Galactic Council has requested a meeting, she said, in the same neutral tone she had used when leaving the chamber. I am authorized to listen to your proposal. The chamber erupted in desperate voices. Representatives shouted over each other, trying to be heard. Some offered money, others offered political concessions. A few even offered to make humans the dominant species in the galaxy. Kate waited for the noise to die down. When the chamber was quiet again, she spoke with the same calm professionalism that had become humanity's signature. The human government has reviewed your situation, she said. We acknowledge that the galaxy is experiencing some difficulties following our departure. However, we want to make sure we understand your position correctly. She paused, letting the tension build. 1 year ago, this council declared that humanity was too dangerous to participate in galactic affairs. You removed our voting rights, canceled our exploration permits, and ordered us to leave all territory outside the Sol system. You said we were aggressive, untrustworthy, and a threat to galactic peace. Her voice remained perfectly neutral, but there was something cold in her eyes. Are you now saying that your previous assessment was incorrect? The question hung in the air like a blade. Every representative in the chamber knew what she was asking. To get human help, they would have to admit that they had been wrong. They would have to acknowledge that humans were not the problem, they were the solution, and they would have to live with the knowledge that 50 million beings had died because of their mistake. Ambassador Kate Phillips waited for an answer. The great council chamber was so quiet that the only sound was the hum of the life support systems. Even though systems were starting to fail because they had been built with human technology that no one else knew how to repair. Council Speaker Zaratala looked around at her fellow representatives. Their faces showed the same mixture of desperation and pride that had been fighting in her own mind for months. To admit they had been wrong would mean accepting responsibility for 50 million deaths, but to stay silent would mean watching billions more die in the coming years. She began, then stopped. The words were harder to say than she had expected. We may have made an error in our assessment of humanity. Kate's expression did not change. An error? Yes, Zaratala continued, her voice growing stronger. We did not fully understand the extent of human involvement in galactic civilization. We thought you were simply another member species. We did not realize you had become essential to our survival. So you are saying that humans are not too dangerous to participate in galactic affairs? The question was like a knife. Everyone in the chamber knew that to answer it honestly would destroy everything they had claimed about humans. But the alternative was watching their civilizations collapse completely. No, Zaratala admitted, you are not too dangerous. You are necessary. Kate nodded once as if she was simply confirming a business appointment. I will relay your message to Earth. You should expect a response within 30 days. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had been forced to admit they were completely wrong about another species. The humiliation was almost as painful as the crisis itself. On Earth, Vice Admiral Chris Parker sat in his office overlooking the rebuilt cities of Luna. 3 years had passed since the human exodus began, and Earth had used that time well. While the galaxy struggled with failing technology and collapsing civilizations, humanity had turned inward and made incredible advances. The Council's message has been received, reported his aide, a young woman named Rachel. They are officially requesting our return to galactic affairs. Chris looked out at the construction ships building new orbital platforms around Earth. The designs were far more advanced than anything humans had shared with the galaxy before. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets, shields that could protect whole star systems, engines that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. "What does the president say?" he asked. "The president has called for a full cabinet meeting. She wants to discuss terms." Chris smiled, but it was not a kind expression. "Terms, yes, I imagine there will be many terms to discuss." The cabinet meeting took place in the deep bunkers beneath Geneva, where Earth's government had moved during the isolation period. President Amanda Carter looked around the table at her advisors. These were the people who had guided humanity through the darkest period in their history. "The galaxy is dying," she said simply. "The question is whether we should save it." "They kicked us out," said Secretary of Defense Chris Parker. "They called us dangerous. They treated us like criminals. Why should we help them now?" "Because we are better than they are," replied Secretary of Health Nina Foster. "We do not let people die just because they hurt our feelings." "This is not about hurt feelings," Chris shot back. "This is about 50 million dead people. 50 million beings who died because the galaxy decided they could live without humans. How many more will die if we teach them they can treat us badly? And still expect our help?" Dr. Nina Foster had spent the past 3 years rebuilding human medical science from the ground up. The new healing devices were so advanced that they could bring people back from the edge of death itself. But she had also seen the reports from the galaxy, and she knew that millions were dying from diseases that humans could cure easily. "We have the power to save them," she said. "Does that not create an obligation?" "We have the power to save them." 3 years ago, too, replied Director Sam Wright, who had overseen the technological shutdown. "They chose to reject that power. They chose to call it dangerous. Why should we believe they have changed their minds permanently?" President Carter listened to the debate with the patience of someone who had already made her decision. She had been Earth's ambassador to the galaxy before becoming president. She had worked with these aliens, negotiated with them, considered some of them friends. Their betrayal had hurt more than she liked to admit. "The question is not whether we can help them," she said finally. "The question is what price they are willing to pay for that help." The response from Earth came exactly 30 days later. Ambassador Kate Phillips appeared on the council chamber's main screen, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood a group of humans in military uniforms, all of them wearing expressions of cold professionalism. "Earth has reviewed the council's request," Kate announced. "We are prepared to discuss terms for limited re-engagement with galactic affairs." "Limited?" asked Zaratala. "What do you mean by limited?" "We mean that humanity will not simply return to the way things were before," Kate replied. "The council made it clear that they do not trust human judgment. Therefore, any future cooperation will be strictly controlled by Earth's government." She paused to let that sink in. "Here are our terms. First, the Galactic Council will be dissolved immediately. It has proven itself incapable of making decisions that benefit galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in protests, but Kate continued speaking as if nothing had happened. "Second, a new governing body will be established with humanity holding permanent veto power over all decisions. No galactic policy will be implemented without human approval." "That is unacceptable," shouted General Thickmore. "You are asking us to surrender our sovereignty?" "We are asking you to accept the reality of your situation," Kate replied calmly. "You have already surrendered your sovereignty. You surrendered it the moment you became dependent on human technology and expertise. We are simply making the arrangement official. Third," she continued, "any species that wishes to receive human aid must sign individual treaties with Earth. These treaties will specify exactly what technology and knowledge will be shared, and under what conditions." "What kind of conditions?" asked Administrator Kolneth. "That will depend on the species and their past behavior toward humanity. Some worlds may receive full restoration of services. Others may receive limited aid. A few may receive nothing at all." The threat was clear. Earth would decide who lived and who died based on how they had treated humans in the past. Species that had supported the human removal would pay a higher price than those who had opposed it. Fourth and finally, Kate said, humanity reserves the right to withdraw from galactic affairs at any time, for any reason, without warning or explanation. If the galaxy proves once again that it cannot be trusted with human cooperation, we will simply leave. The terms were harsh, but the alternative was clear. Without human help, the galaxy would continue to collapse. More worlds would die, more civilizations would fall. The choice was between survival under human terms or extinction under alien pride. "How long do we have to decide?" asked Zaratala. "You have already decided," Kate replied. "The moment you called us back, you admitted that you cannot survive without us. The only question now is whether you will accept our terms or continue pretending that you have other options." The communication ended, leaving the council to face the reality of their situation. They had gotten exactly what they asked for when they removed humans from the galaxy. They had learned what galactic civilization looked like without human interference. It looked like death. One by one, the alien representatives began to signal their acceptance of Earth's terms. They had no choice. Their pride had already cost them 50 million lives. They could not afford to let it cost them billions more. The humans had walked away silently when ordered to leave. Now they were returning on their own terms, with their own conditions and their own agenda. The galaxy would survive, but it would never be the same. The council had regretted everything. Now they would have to live with the consequences of that. Regret for the rest of their lives. In the end, the humans had won not through violence or threats, but through simple absence. They had shown the galaxy what life was like without them, and the galaxy had decided that any price was worth paying to avoid that fate again. The silence was finally broken, but the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned during those 3 dark years when the humans walked away.